Good morning. This hearing on the Subcommittee on Readiness and Management Support will come to order. Today, this subcommittee meets to receive the testimony from Deputy Secretary of Defense David Norquist concerning the Department of Defense's 2018 and 2019 audits. Last year, when he was serving as the DoD Comptroller, Secretary Norquist completed the first DoD audit ever. Soon thereafter, Secretary Norquist was nominated and then confirmed as Deputy Secretary of Defense with overwhelming Senate support from both sides of the aisle. He is a wealth of knowledge on these issues, and I thank him for being here today. To a lot of people, aside from my good friend Senator Perdue, who I'm hopeful will be here a little bit later, the DoD audit might not come across as the most interesting topic in the world. However, Ranking Member Kane and I take our oversight responsibility seriously and are happy to have this important and timely hearing. Another responsibility we take seriously has been one of providing the funding needed to rebuild our military with a specific focus on restoring readiness. Conducting an audit of this magnitude is a massive undertaking, as I'm sure we'll hear. In fact, until Secretary Norquist arrived, it had never happened. The Pentagon had never completed an audit. Let me repeat that. In its history, the Department of Defense had never completed an audit. Kind of remarkable. The FY19 DoD audit is one of the largest audits of any organization in history. Over the course of this year, this audit has required more than 1,400 auditors and hundreds of DoD site inspections. These auditors and inspections evaluated thousands of sample and document items to account for the roughly $2.8 trillion in DoD assets. Conducting an audit of this size is no easy task, but it's a critical function that DoD must do, and the results reveal issues that we all must learn from. There is still much more work to be done, but I commend the Secretary for undertaking this difficult but important task. As of last Friday, the Department of Defense completed its second agency-wide audit, and while it did not receive an overall clean opinion, much knowledge was gained from actually doing the audit. I'm sure we'll hear more, but over 24 individual audits done across the different agencies, 7 did come back clean. So why do we take the time to do an audit? In part, it is to encourage the more responsible use of resources within the department, and from a readiness perspective, the ability to promote real change within the department. And while identifying cyber vulnerabilities in DoD information technology systems, or locating unaccounted for equipment, or improving the record keeping of personnel is not a glamorous undertaking, it does produce process improvements and technological upgrades that are long overdue. These improvements are critical to the DoD's responsibility that, quote, "It's important to gain full value from every taxpayer dollar spent on defense, thereby earning the trust of Congress," unquote. That is from the 2019 National Defense Strategy. In other words, if DoD wants Congress to continue to fund the military in order to counter great power competition, like that from Russia and China, as laid out in the 2019 NDS, we in the Congress and the American people need to have the confidence that these dollars are being spent wisely. As Chairman Inhofe regularly states, the NDS has been preparing our military for a return to strategic competition and does represent a prime example of bipartisanship for the support of that strategy and our troops in the Senate. The NDS explicitly states the audit as a priority towards driving a better budget discipline for the department and achieving our overall national defense goals. I hope this budget discipline starts with the audit and spreads throughout the department to all the financial processes within DoD, including our procurement, acquisition, and contracting processes that this subcommittee has oversight of. I look forward to hearing about the progress, some of the successes, some of the failures, And I know my ranking member, Senator Kane, is also interested, so I will turn the dais over to him for his opening remarks. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Let me begin just with a kind of very basic question. And I'm not sure you have the answer since you've only been in your position and the comptroller position for a couple of years, but from your perspective, why was the Pentagon never audited? You would think, given what you just mentioned, how important it is to the country, how large it is, how complex it is, that's exactly the kind of federal agency that you do want to audit. Why was this the first time that somebody undertook this daunting task? And again, I commend you for doing it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So let me start just to clarify. The Pentagon has multiple audits. We have GAO, we have the IG, we have others. They do program audits, particular subjects. The difference with the financial statement is the sheer breadth and depth of it. It is an end-to-end audit on a dramatic scale.
What you just did twice.
What we just did twice.
That had never happened before.
That had never happened before.
Why?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is it is an extremely hard task that would outlast anyone who started it.
Okay, and the Pentagon's used to hard tasks, so.
It is.
It won World War II, for example.
They did. They did. The challenge with the audit is there was an emphasis on trying to get ready for it. And this is where I brought a fundamentally different view from those who had come before me. They said, it's too expensive to pay the auditors. Let's get ourselves ready enough that we could pass the audit and then bring the auditors in. My experience at Homeland Security, where they were under audit, was that that would be a major mistake. Homeland Security, we didn't have a choice. When I showed up, the auditors were already there. I found the auditors and their feedback to be the central piece of getting us to that clean opinion. So my view is the money we paid the auditors made sure that all the other money we were spending was going towards valuable things. We were getting feedback on whether we were being successful. So even though Defense Department was spending money on fixing problems, they had no audit baseline by which to tell you, were they better from one year to the next? We have fixed that in this approach. We are carefully measuring those items precisely for that purpose. And I think that's the biggest difference, is I believe that the auditors are the key step in getting us to the clean opinion, not something you bring at the end when you think you're ready.
Okay, let me dig into that a little bit more, because the audit did cost a lot of money. I think the FY19 audit cost close to $1 billion. So if we're doing this annually, which is your goal, correct? Will this eventually pay for itself in terms of, or is it already paying for itself?
So let's take that into pieces. So before we started the audit, the department was spending $770 million to fix problems. With the audit piece is about $195, $200 million we pay the external auditors. We know from the experience of the Corps of Engineers that when they went from no opinion to a clean opinion, their cost of their audit dropped in half. So over time, that number will come down as we start to move from where they have to do detailed sampling to what we call test of controls. But that's a level of funding that's necessary for transparency. I mean, you think $200 million is 1/30th of 1% of our budget. To be held accountable, that's fine. We then have to spend certain money on DoD side to support that. Those numbers will come down as well. The big number, about $500 million, is in the remediation. And the question there is, can you show what you have fixed? In the absence of the audit, it's very hard. One of the things I learned in my prior jobs is self-reporting of fixing problems isn't a very reliable indicator. I was dependent upon the auditors confirming that people had in fact fixed it. And one of the best things the auditors show us is one organization says they've fixed 10 problems and the auditor agrees with all 10. I have great confidence in that organization's ability to go forward. Another organization claims they've fixed 10 and the auditor agrees with them on 3. I have a problem. I've got some training I need to do, some people I need to talk to. That's not going to get them to success. But you can't wait to the end of the process to find that. You need the auditors doing that on a continual basis. So we have already seen benefits and savings and return on investment that I'd not expected to see this early, long before we got to the point where I expected the cost to come down. Well, we can, I can go on more about DFAS, but I'll let you wait if you...
Let me just ask another basic question. So for those of us who are not auditors, what exactly does this entail? You're going to installations, you have people fanning out over all our military bases, they're going to supply depots, what exactly are they doing? They're not counting every rifle and every tank, or are they?
No, they can't, because the sheer labor that would be involved is the problem. What the commercial practice brings us is best practices, which is they will go up to the highest level of the organization and look into their databases and say, show me everything you think you own and have in inventory. So they start there, and then they pull samples from that and follow it all the way down to the installation. They went to Fort Wainwright, they went to Anniston, and they come in with a list and say, I need to see not just a tank, I need to see this tank with this serial number that's supposed to be here. And when they show up, is it in working condition? Because that's one of the things they test for, is you're accurate on working condition. Do you have proof of ownership? Is it where it's supposed to be? They walk through each of those, and then they look around the base, and they find a series of items, and they go the other direction, which is, here are 25 things we found on the base. Show us that you at the department level have them in your system. So it goes one direction, and then it comes the other. And what they're looking for is examples of a breakdown, where the summary is not equal to the parts. But that sampling process across inventory, and then they do the same thing with pay. You paid somebody a certain amount. Do you have the records to back up that that soldier was in fact promoted? Did they in fact qualify for hazardous duty pay? Do you have the paperwork to support that? And can you produce it in a timely manner? That's the process they go through. It's relatively extensive, but it's the standards that we're held to.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'm glad you're here to testify, and hopefully we're all going to learn from this, and most importantly, that the Pentagon in as well. Mr. Secretary, let me ask a couple other questions. You mentioned that certain base commanders were very open and willing to work. Did you run into some obstinance or resistance from other commanders, and was there a correlation between that and the maybe not scoring so well, or was the word out from the leadership in the Pentagon to make sure there was good cooperation here?
So I think it's gotten better from year to year. The auditors were the ones who gave me the feedback, and they said the more they're engaged, the more likely that you are to see the results. It's a question of them focusing on the items in the process and what they need to be accountable for. But here is the big surprise for the audit. One of the concerns we had going in, from those of you advocating for audit and those of us pushing it, is the risk that would be seen as a paperwork drill. You come, you audit me, and all you're doing to check is a bunch of paper and whether my bills match my invoices. This is just an admin drill. The issue over inventory, things that had direct benefit to readiness, this quickly turned around the views of the military that we dealt with to understand this wasn't about paperwork. This was about readiness. This was about being able to do their mission. So I never ended up getting the pushback that I was afraid I was going to see, and that everyone, until you started it, everyone just assumed was going to be the natural outcome of the audit. So I think we've seen a change. I think we've seen that level of emphasis. Some places are stronger than others, but I think we're going to continue to see it grow.
Let me ask, related to that topic, some of the media, which I'm glad they covered it, but not surprisingly, the headlines were a little alarming. There was a Reuters piece a couple days ago, Pentagon gets failing grade in its second audit, and then a Bloomberg piece just, yesterday, I think, headline, Air Force's inventory listed wrong sites for 79 nuclear missiles. So, misidentification of 79 active Minuteman II nuclear-armed missiles, almost a fifth of the fleet. So that's pretty alarming. Can you talk to some of these headlines, and particularly the one with regard to 79, quote, missing nuclear missiles?
Right. So these types of...
Were they really missing? I'm a little bit concerned if that was the case.
So the proper title would have been 79 uninstalled missile motors, because they aren't actual ICBMs and missiles. They are the motors that are used in them, and when they're pulled out and put into maintenance in the supply system, there was an issue in the accuracy of the supply system because it's manual, tracking whether they were still on the base and whether they were at the depot. But I don't think uninstalled missile motors in maintenance has the same drama as the title that you read. This comes up in the audit. Occasionally you'll have some story that references the department and trillions of dollars, even though that number is orders of magnitude larger than our budget. There are these types of misunderstandings of what the auditors, again, remember, these audit reports are written by accountants, and so they are written with a level of detail that makes sense for somebody of that background, but to others, these stories come out and you try and translate it and you get it wrong. So part of my job is, when these come up, explaining, no, our missiles are in the ground, we know where they are, they don't tend to move that often for the ICBMs. So 79 would not have been relocated. But this is missile motors, and the answer is it's still a problem. We still have to get an accuracy of our missile motors, but it's not it's a regular supply issue and an accuracy from a manually updated database.
Okay, so on that headline, still useful, and it, obviously keeping track of the missile motors is important, but it wasn't as if there was a loss of the.
Correct, and they did
We knew where these ICBMs were.
And the auditors did a site visit at F.E. Warren, and they gave it 100% thumbs up. I met with them and asked them what issues. They didn't even bring this one up. They just talked about supply issues in general.
And failing grade, that's accurate. Was it
On the overall audit?
Yes.
Yeah, we didn't pass. I mean, well, in fairness, 7 organizations did, and the leaders of those should get credit because many of them started those audits before anybody else in the department. Some of them have conflicting opinions for 5 or 10 years. That was sheer will by the leadership of that organization because there was not a pull signal from the department level for many of those. So credit to those who got it, but we still got another,
Let me ask a more parochial question from my perspective. You said you were at Fort Wainwright in Alaska. What were the findings there? Positive, negative, any good examples or things that need to be improved upon?
Sure. So it's a great example of the test they did. So they went to Fort Wainwright, and they had a list of 108 items that they wanted to find. And these were everything from rotary wing aircraft to comms gear. And then they looked around, and they picked 25 items they found, and then they went back to the database and said, can you show me these 25? They had 95.5% pass rate. There was 6 things. Examples included the serial number didn't match. Okay, well, then we can't be certain this is the same item. You have an item, but the serial doesn't ever match. Or the item was there, but it wasn't recorded in the system. Okay, you've got a missing piece of inventory. 6 is somewhat small, but again, this is a sample, so the question becomes, what for you if you extrapolate that? But it was 95.5% pass rate. But that's a good example of the visits they did around the country, and I think it's the type of thing where that feedback is helpful because the local commander can figure out why. Why do I have these 6 areas? And then they can determine, is it in other areas as well? Do I have, if they came back and pulled a different sample, would I be 100% or would I still have the same errors? And then they have, 6 to 9 months to work on it before the auditors potentially sample them again.